The detective slid a photograph across the table and asked me if I knew the woman in it. I did. I had cooked her breakfast every single morning for 8 months. Grits with a little butter, the way my own mother taught me back when butter was a luxury, and you learned to make a little of it, stretch across a whole family. I knew the small mole beneath her left ear. I knew she took her coffee with 3 sugars and told everyone it was 2. I knew she hummed old Sam Cooke songs while she folded my bath towels and that she cried real tears at my kitchen table the first time I showed her a photograph of my Elijah gone 20 years now. What I did not know, what nobody in that whole city had thought to tell a 67-year-old woman living alone at the end of Pinewood Lane, was that the name I had been calling her for 8 months was not her name. Detective Greer had kind eyes. Tired but kind, the eyes of a man who had sat across too many tables like this one. He tapped the corner of the photograph with a single finger and asked me his second question quieter than the first, and I felt the cold come up through the linoleum of that little room and settle in my chest like it had been waiting there for me my whole life. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "how many times did you sign for her?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the honest answer was that I did not know. I had signed whatever she put in front of me. I had signed with her warm hand wrapped around mine, steadying the pen the way you steady a child learning to write their letters for the very first time. I want you to understand something before I go one word further, because I have turned it over in my mind 10,000 times since that afternoon. They spent the better part of a year teaching me to be afraid of my own son, and by the time I finally understood who I should have been afraid of, I had already signed my whole life away and thanked her out loud for helping me do it. To understand how a grown woman hands everything she has to a stranger and calls it a blessing, you have to go all the way back to the morning that stranger first knocked on my door. But before that, you have to know who I was when she found me. Because she didn't find just anybody. She went looking, and she found me. My name is Odessa May Whitfield, and for 31 years I served lunch to other people's children. I want you to close your eyes and picture it with me. 6 o'clock in the morning, still dark outside the school kitchen, so cold you could see your own breath curling in the air until the big ovens finally came up to heat. I'd tie my hair back and snap on that hairnet, and from that moment I would not sit down again until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Fish sticks on Fridays. Government cheese melted over elbow macaroni that I somehow made taste like Sunday dinner. Peach cobbler in the fall when the cans went on sale. I learned the name of every child who came through my line. And more than their names, I learned which ones came back around a second time, because there wasn't enough waiting for them at home. Those children I gave a little extra to. A bigger scoop. An extra roll pressed into a small hand wrapped in a napkin so the other kids wouldn't see and start something. I looked the other way when the rules said I shouldn't, and I never once wrote it down, and if the good Lord has kept any account of my life at all, I'd like to think he wrote that part down for me. I raised my Terrence in that kitchen in a manner of speaking. His daddy, my Elijah, passed when the boy was just 12 years old. A stroke. Right there on the concrete floor of the plant where he'd worked 18 years, packing crates onto pallets. One morning he was making jokes with the men on his shift, laughing that big laugh of his that filled up a whole room, and by lunchtime the world had folded itself in half, and I was a widow at 41 years old with a boy who wouldn't look me in the eye. I did not have the luxury of grief. I want you to understand that, because I think it explains a great deal about how I ended up sitting across a table from a detective all these years later. There was rent, and there was a growing boy, and there was a light bill that did not care one bit how sad I was. Grief is a thing for people who can afford to stop. I could not stop, so I became his mother and his father both. I cut hair on Saturday mornings on the back porch, $5 a head, kids for 3. I took in ironing. And every Sunday after service at Mount Zion, I sold sweet potato pie and hot water cornbread out of the trunk of my car in the church parking lot wrapped in aluminum foil, still warm, the steam fogging up the inside of the windows. That pie money is what paid for Terrence's 8th grade class trip to Washington, D.C. I can see the photograph even now, my boy standing on the marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial in a windbreaker 2 sizes too big, so he could grow into it. And he is smiling, really smiling, one of the few times I remember him smiling after his daddy died. I paid for that smile 1 slice of pie at a time, and I would do it again 1,000 times over. I tell you all of this, not so you'll feel sorry for me. I have never had one bit of use for pity. I tell you so that you understand exactly what I built with these 2 hands. Because in the year of our Lord, 2019, at the age of 60, I did a thing that women like me are not supposed to get to do. I bought a house. Now it was not a grand house. Do not go picturing anything grand. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a little brick thing at the dead end of Pinewood Lane on what people in Macon politely call the other side. The kitchen floor sloped just enough that a dropped orange would roll all on its own to the far corner and wait for you there. The paint peeled in the back bedroom. The screen door never did hang right. But it was mine. 31 years of lunch trays and a modest little bit of Elijah's pension had finally paid that mortgage down to nothing. And the afternoon I made the last payment, I did not go home and celebrate. I sat in my old car in the bank parking lot with the deed papers in my lap, and I put my head down on the steering wheel, and I cried like somebody had died. But it was the good kind of crying. The kind that means you lived. The kind that means every early morning and every aching Saturday, and every pie sold out of a car trunk had added up to something you could stand inside of, and lock the door, and call your own. I planted tomatoes out back that first spring. Then bell peppers, then collards. And then just because I could, just because there was finally nobody to tell me it was a waste, a whole row of sunflowers along the back fence. They served no purpose at all except to be tall and yellow and beautiful in the morning light, and at 60 years old I had decided that beautiful for no reason was reason enough. I had my church. Mount Zion Missionary Baptist, 40 years a member, same pew, left side 4 rows from the front. I had my prayer circle 6 of us old women who had buried husbands and raised up grandchildren and knew where every last body in that congregation was buried, though we were far too dignified to ever say so out loud. Miss Bernadine Jefferson sat to my right every single Sunday for as long as I could remember, and if I ever nodded off during one of Reverend's longer sermons, Bernadine would reach over without so much as turning her head and pinch the meat of my arm until I sat up straight. That was my life. Small, paid for. Mine. I need you to love it, this little life of mine. The sloped floor and the foolish sunflowers, and the pinch of an old friend's hand, because I need you to feel exactly what it cost me when I very nearly lost every last piece of it. It started the way these things so often do, with a fall. Nothing dramatic, mind you. I stepped down wrong coming off the back porch with a basket of tomatoes on my hip, and my ankle turned on the gravel, and down I went. I lay there in the dirt a good 10 minutes before I could gather myself up. 1 tomato rolled clear out to the fence, and my hip ached for a week. The young doctor at the clinic, a nice young man, could not have been much older than my grandson, looked at my chart, and then he looked at me over the top of his glasses, and he said the handful of words that opened the door to everything that came after. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you have anyone at home who could help you out just for a little while till you're steady again?" I told him I had a son, which was true. It just was not the whole truth. But that young doctor didn't need my whole truth. And he wrote something on his pad and a service was called, and that was that. She came out on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because I'd baked a pound cake that morning, and the warm butter and vanilla smell of it was still hanging in the house when I opened my front door. She was younger than me by maybe 15 years. Warm-faced, soft-spoken. She had a way of looking at you like you were the only person she had thought about all day long, like she'd been waiting on her porch just for you. And in the crook of her arm she carried a tote bag, and peeking out the top of that tote bag were the gold-edged pages of a well-worn Bible, and I confess to you that the sight of it did more to open my heart than I would have admitted to anyone at the time. "Miss Odessa," she said before I had even told her my name, "now would you look at this beautiful home?" Her name, she told me, was Simone. Simone Vaughn. Within a week she was more than help. She was company, and company is a different thing entirely. She cooked, though the Lord knows I could still cook fine for myself. But she'd fix a plate and set it down, and then sit right across from me and eat with me, so that I was not eating alone. And if you have ever eaten your supper alone at a kitchen table for years and years with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock for company, then you know that there is no dollar amount you could put on the simple mercy of another face across the table. She read scripture with me in the evenings, her voice slow and easy over the Psalms. She remembered without my ever having to tell her twice that my Elijah's birthday fell on the 9th of March. And when the 9th of March came around that year, she went out on her own and bought a single white carnation and set it in a little juice glass right beside his photograph on the mantel, and she never said a word about it, just let me find it there. I wept when I found it. And she came and stood behind my chair and put her hands on my shoulders and let me. I loved her. I want to be plain about that because people always ask me later, and always in a certain tone of voice. But Miss Odessa, how could you not have known? And the only honest answer I have is that I loved her, like the daughter the good Lord never did see fit to send me. And you do not audit the people you love. You do not go behind them checking their arithmetic. That is the whole terrible design of the thing. That is the very door they walk through. Miss Odessa, she said that first week, easing the mail right out of my hands before I'd so much as glanced at it. You let me get the mail from here on out. That front walk gets slick, and I would never forgive myself if you went down again. Such a small kindness. I handed the whole stack right over, and I felt looked after doing it. And there was one more thing that first season, though, at the time. I did not count it as a thing at all. Little by little, so slow I never once caught it happening, I stopped going to church. It was never a fight. Understand that. It was always love. Miss Odessa, it's bitter cold out this morning in that ankle of yours. Why don't you let me stay home and fix us something nice, and we'll have our own little service, just the two of us. And it was nice. That's the thing nobody tells you. It was so nice. It took me the better part of a year to realize that I had not sat down next to Bernadine Jefferson in months, that the pinch of her hand on my arm had become a memory, that not one of my 6 prayer circle sisters had come by, and that I had stopped wondering why. Because by then the telephone had come to mean mostly one thing to me, and that one thing was my son. I need to tell you about Terrence now, and I need to tell it to you the way I understood it back then, which I know now, God help me, was not the way it was at all. Back then my son scared me a little. He had grown up hard after his daddy died. Pulled inward, went quiet on me, started looking at me across the supper table like I owed him something more than my exhaustion, and I never did have the something more to give him. He made a decent life for himself, 2 states over a good wife, Ayanna, who was a nurse at a big hospital, and my 2 grandbabies, Jalen and little Nia. But there had always been a wall between my boy and me, built up brick by brick over the years, and I had long since given up trying to climb it. That autumn, right around the time Simone settled in, he started calling more. And I will be honest with you about how it felt, because I owe you my honesty even where it shames me. It felt like pressure. It felt like being squeezed. Mama, who is this woman staying in your house? His voice tight, clipped the exact way Elijah's used to get when the bills came due. How did you find her? What agency sent her? Mama, have you signed anything? Have you signed anything? That was the question he kept circling back to over and over into my ears. In those days, it did not sound one bit like concern. It sounded like a man standing at a distance doing arithmetic. It sounded like a son counting up his mother's house. And every single time I hung up that phone, Simone would be right there, drying a dish, folding a towel. And she would say the gentlest thing, a thing that fit so perfectly into the old, sore, tender place his daddy's death had left in me, that I never once thought to question it. He only ever calls when he wants something, Miss Odessa. You know that better than I do. Don't you let that boy get you all worked up. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. And God forgive me, it rang true. Because hadn't it always been that way? Hadn't the wall always been there between us? He came to the house once, in October, unannounced with Ayanna beside him. I remember Simone went stiff as a board when that truck pulled into my drive, and I remember thinking to myself how protective she was of me, bless her heart. It did not go well. My son walked through my house like a man taking inventory of an estate. He pulled open the drawer in the front room where I keep my important papers. He asked flat out to see my bank statements, and I told him the truth, which was that I did not rightly know where they had gotten to anymore, and something crossed his face when I said it. Something I read back then as pure greed. A man realizing the money was slipping out from between his fingers. And Ayanna, my daughter-in-law, the nurse, she took hold of my arm, gentle but firm, and turned it over and studied the thin skin of my forearm like she was searching it for something. I snatched my arm back from her, offended clear through, and Simone stepped in between us like a shield thrown up to protect me. I really think you all should go now, Simone said, soft as anything, sad as anything. You're upsetting her. Can't you see you're upsetting your mother? And they went. But at the door, my son turned back and looked at me with an expression I could not name and did not try to. I told myself it was because I had caught him out. I told myself I had protected my little house from a boy who had come to pick it clean. I know now what that look on his face was. I have had many long nights to learn it. It was the look of a drowning man watching the very last boat pull away from him. But I am getting ahead of myself, and that is not fair to you. In this part of the story, you are only permitted to know what I knew. And what I knew was that my son wanted something from me, and the only person left in the world who loved me was standing in my kitchen drying my dishes, telling me I was right to be afraid. There was a card around that time, too. Terrence's handwriting on the envelope. I caught just a glimpse of it in the stack before Simone gathered the mail up, but I never did see the inside of it. I want you to hold on to that small fact and carry it with you. Just a card I never saw. From a son I had been carefully, patiently taught to fear. It was Simone who found the papers. She came to me one gray afternoon in early winter with a troubled look on her face, holding a manila folder she said she had come across while she was tidying up my desk. Inside were legal documents, the serious kind, with the pale blue backing official looking from a law office 2 whole states away. And there on the top page was my son's name. I could not make heads or tails of the language in it. All those whereases and heretofores. But Simone could, or said she could, and she sat herself down beside me at the kitchen table and lowered her voice to almost a whisper, like she was afraid the very walls might overhear. Miss Odessa, now I don't want to frighten you, but I have to tell you what this is. This here is guardianship paperwork. Your son is trying to have you declared incompetent. He wants to stand up in front of a judge and say that you cannot take care of your own self anymore so that he can take control of everything you have. This house, your accounts, all of it. That is what all these questions of his have really been about this whole time. I felt the floor of my life tilt the same sickening way it had tilted on that gravel the day I fell. Guardianship, my own boy, going before a judge to swear that his mama had lost her mind. Now, and I need you to lean in close and hear me on this, because this is the very hinge that the whole terrible thing swings upon. Those papers were not what she said they were. Not even a little bit. But I did not know that. I would not know it for a long, long, cold time. All I knew sitting at my own table that winter afternoon was that the one person left in this world who seemed to truly love me had just laid down proof in black and white that my son wanted to lock me away and take my house. You don't have to worry about a single thing, Simone said, and she reached over and folded my shaking hand up inside both of hers. I am going to help you protect yourself. We are going to get every last thing squared away nice and legal so that nobody on this earth can touch you or what's yours. All right, sweetheart. You just leave all this paperwork to me. And I did. May God forgive me, I did. I handed it all to her, and I felt safe for the first time in weeks. That was the winter she started handling my bills. Just the bills at first, to save you the aggravation of it, Miss Odessa. And it made all the sense in the world, because my hands had started shaking worse than they used to, and I could not always make my signature come out right, and she was so patient with me, so gentle. She set up something on her computer, she said, so that the bills would just pay their own selves, and I'd never have to fret. She had me sign a little card so she could pick up my prescriptions from the pharmacy for me. Small things. Kindnesses, everyone. Each one a single thin thread laid across my life, and I never once saw the net taking shape. Her cousin came by one afternoon. Della, her name, was a big, laughing, heavy-set woman who, as it happened, was a notary public, and who, as it happened, stopped in for a cup of coffee on the very same afternoon that Simone had a form for me to sign. Now, this is just an insurance renewal, Miss Odessa, Simone told me, sliding the paper across the table with 2 fingers. We can't let your coverage go and lapse on us, can we? Right here on the line, that's all. My hand shook. The pen wandered off the line, and Simone reached over, smooth as anything, and wrapped her warm hand around mine and steadied it and guided my signature down onto the paper, and Della pressed her little notary seal into it with a soft crunch, and the 2 of them looked up at me and smiled like I had just done something wonderful. I felt so taken care of. I need you to sit in that with me for a moment, because it is the very cruelest part of all of it. I felt loved. I felt like somebody's mother again. I did notice one small, strange thing that afternoon, though I dismissed it the very moment it crossed my mind. When Simone set her tote bag down on the table to go hunting for the notary's good pen, a prescription bottle rolled out of it, and across the tabletop one of hers, I assumed, though I hadn't known she took anything at all. And for just one second, the pharmacy label was turned toward me. The name printed on it was not Simone Vaughn. It read S.R. DeVoe. I figured the pharmacy had simply gone and made a mistake. People mix up names all the day long. I handed her back the bottle, and she thanked me and tucked it away down in her bag, and I did not think on it again. Not for months. For the first time since Elijah died, I felt taken care of. I had no earthly idea that being taken care of and being taken were about to turn out to mean the very same thing. I found the card on a Thursday, and I have thanked the good Lord for that particular Thursday every day of my life since. Simone had gone out to the pharmacy. I was carrying a bag of vegetable peelings out to the bin in the side yard, humming to myself, not looking for one single thing, not suspecting one single thing, when I lifted the lid of the recycling bin and saw the corner of a blue envelope tucked down underneath the flattened-out cereal boxes. I do not know to this day why I reached for it. I have asked myself that question more times than I could count. Maybe it was just the color of it, that soft cornflower blue against all that cardboard. Maybe the Lord himself reached down and put my hand on it. It was addressed to me, in my son's own cramped handwriting. The postmark was 2 months old, and it had never once been opened. I stood right there in the cold side yard with the bin lid still in one hand and my heart going strange and fast in my chest. I worked my thumb up under the flap and I tore it careless, rough my hands too unsteady to be gentle about it. Inside was a birthday card, a soft one with flowers on the front, the kind of card a man buys when he doesn't rightly know what he's supposed to say. And folded up inside it were 2 crisp $100 bills straight from the bank, still smelling of the bank. And underneath them, in that careful, cramped hand I had known his whole life, my son had written this: "Happy birthday, Mama. Please call me back. I need to know you're okay. I love you. T." I read it 4 times over, standing there in the cold. Now, I want you to follow me close here, because this is the exact moment the ground beneath me shifted, though mind you, I did not run from it yet. I was not ready yet. They had spent months, all of them, teaching me that my son was a greedy man. A man circling my little house like a buzzard on a fence post, patient just waiting for his chance to pick it clean. A man who only ever called his mother when he wanted something out of her. But a greedy man does not send money. A greedy man does not write, "Please call me back and I need to know you're okay." And a greedy man's birthday card to his mother does not end up torn open by that mother's own shaking hands 2 whole months too late, because somebody threw it down in the trash before she could ever lay eyes on it. Somebody had thrown my son's card in the trash. I folded that card up small, and I put it deep in my apron pocket. And when Simone came home from the pharmacy, humming, calling out, "Miss Odessa, I'm home," I did not say one single word to her about it. I told myself all that long evening that there was surely some explanation. I just did not let myself think yet about who I would have to ask to get it. I did not sleep one wink that night. I lay in the dark, and I did arithmetic, the very same kind of arithmetic I had once stood in my kitchen and accused my own son of doing. When was the last time I had truly spoken to Terrence, not been interrupted, not had the telephone eased gently out of my hand, but really and truly talked to my boy? I could not remember it. When was the last time I had held one of my own bank statements in my own 2 hands and read it with my own eyes? I could not remember that either. The next morning I did a thing I had not done in the better part of a year. I lied to Simone. I told her I felt like sitting out on the porch a while by myself to pray. She smiled at me so sweet and told me to take all the time I needed, and she went on inside. And the second her car had backed out of my drive and rolled off down Pinewood Lane, I got up off that porch, and I went next door to my neighbor Gloria's house, and I asked if I might use her telephone. I want you to take notice of that. I did not use my own telephone. Some old animal part of me, some part older than my fear, already knew better than to use my own telephone. Terrence answered on the second ring, and when he heard my voice come down the line, he went so quiet that I thought for a moment the call had dropped. Then I heard him start to cry. My son, 44 years old, a grown man with children of his own, crying like the 12-year-old boy who once stood beside me at his daddy's grave and would not take my hand. "Mama!" He could hardly force the word out. "Mama, I have been calling you for 4 months. 4 whole months. I have left you so many messages I lost count. I sent cards. I sent money. I got in my truck, and I drove 500 miles to your front door, and that woman stood in the doorway and would not let me in my own mother's house. I filed reports, Mama. I called the county on her, and every single time, every last time, somebody told me that you did not want to see me. They said you told them so yourself." "I never said that." My voice came out of me in a whisper. "Baby, I never once said that." "I know." And his voice broke clean in half. "I know that now, Mama." I asked him about these messages. He said he'd left dozens. I had received exactly none of them. Every single one gone before it ever reached my ears, cleared away by those same warm hands that steadied my pen at the kitchen table. Those spam calls that Simone was forever so helpfully deleting off my phone for me so I wouldn't be bothered. I hung up Gloria's telephone, and my knees would not hold my weight. Gloria sat me down at her own table and put a glass of water in my hand and did not ask me one question, God bless her. And then I called my grandson. Jalen is 16 years old, and that boy can make a computer stand up and dance. I asked him if he could help his grandmother get into her own bank account, and there was a pause, and he said, "Grandma, you don't know your own password." And I had to say to him, Baby, I don't even know anymore if it's still mine. He walked me through it, patient as a school teacher, right there on Gloria's phone. And the very first thing that Reset told the two of us was this. The email address tied to my bank account was not my email address. It was one I had never in my life seen. Some string of letters and numbers that meant nothing at all to me. Somebody had gone in and quietly changed the place where my own bank sent all of its news so that its news would never ever find its way to me. And then when we finally did get inside, when the numbers finally loaded up onto that little glowing screen, I had to hand Gloria back her phone because I could not see a thing through the water standing in my eyes. The money was going. It had been going for months, small amounts at first, then not so small. Steady withdrawals week after week after week, flowing out of my life and into an account I did not recognize wearing down the 31 years I had saved up one lunch tray at a time. I sat in Gloria's kitchen, and I did not cry loud. I got quiet instead. The dangerous kind of quiet. The kind of quiet Elijah used to warn people about back when there was an Elijah. That afternoon I did a braver thing than I had done since the day we buried my husband. I went back into my own house and I acted normal. I fed Simone the very same warm smile she had been feeding me all these months. I went out and said my prayers on the porch, and my knee truly did ache, and none of that part was a lie. And that night, once she had gone off to bed and the house had gone still, I took that manila folder, the guardianship papers, the proof that my son wanted me locked away, and I carried it into the bathroom, and I photographed every single page of it with Gloria's phone, which I had not given back. And I sent every page to Jalen. He called me back the very next morning from the parking lot of his high school before his first bell. Grandma? His voice was strange. Careful the way you're careful carrying something you're afraid to drop. I read all of these, and I showed them to my mom. His mother, Ayana, my daughter-in-law, the nurse who had turned my arm over in her hands. Grandma, this isn't guardianship. This is the opposite of guardianship. I gripped the porch rail with my free hand. Dad hired a lawyer, Jalen said. Back in the fall, right after you fell. He set up a trust, and the whole entire point of it, Grandma, I'm reading it to you right here. The whole point was to put you in control of everything. Your house, your money, all of it. Locked up tight so that nobody could touch a dime of it but you. He wasn't trying to take your house away from you. The whole world went very, very quiet around me. He was trying to build a wall around it, my grandson said softly. To keep somebody out. Do you understand now what she had done? My son had gone to a lawyer he could not afford and spent money he did not have to build his mother a fortress. And Simone had gone through my desk and found the blueprints for that very fortress, and she had held them up in front of my frightened face and told me they were the bars of a cage. She had taken the single most loving thing my boy had done for me in 20 long years, and she had turned it inside my own scared mind into the final proof that he was my enemy. Every warning he had ever tried to give me about her, she had reached up and caught right out of the air and bent back the other way. See how he wants to control you, Miss Odessa. See how he can't stand it that you finally have somebody who loves you for you. She had not just stolen my money. She had stolen my son. She had reached her hand right down into my chest and cut the one last cord that was still holding the two of us together, and she had made me hand her the scissors and say thank you. I want to tell you something, and I want you to believe me when I say it. I was not frightened anymore. Somewhere in that long, cold, quiet morning out on my porch, the fear just got up and left me. And something older and harder and a good deal more like my Elijah moved in to take its place at the table. But I had one more thing yet to learn that week, and it was the worst thing of them all. I decided that I would test her, just a little, just to see with my own eyes. That evening over supper, I mentioned it light and easy as you please, passing her the cornbread that I would like to take a little money out of the bank soon. Just a few $100s, I said. For church, for the building fund they were always going on about. And I watched something move behind Simone Vaughn's warm brown eyes. Just a flicker. There and then gone again, quick as a fish turning in dark water. Oh, now, Miss Odessa. She reached across my table and patted the back of my hand. You don't want to be worrying yourself with the bank. Not after everything. You remember what happened with the stove, don't you? You remember you left that back burner on all night long, and I had to get up in the dark and come turn it off before you burned this whole house down around the both of us. I never left that stove on. I have never in 67 years of living left a stove on. My mother would have skinned me. My grandmother would have risen up out of her grave. Terrence asked me to keep a close eye on your memory. She went on so tender now, so terribly sad for me. He worries about you something awful. We both do, sweetheart. And that's why I really do think it's best if I just handle all the money for the time being. That's what it's for, so that you don't have to be afraid anymore. She was doing it right there in front of me, at my own kitchen table under my own roof. She was reaching into my mind and quietly rewriting it calmly, telling me about things that had never once happened until I half started to believe I truly was the one who was confused. And I will tell you the whole shameful truth of it. For one terrible moment it worked. For one moment I sat there and I thought, did I leave that stove on? Am I losing it after all? Is that what's happening to me? And everyone can see it but me. That is how good she was. That is exactly how the thing is built to work. It gets down inside you, and it turns your own mind into a weapon, and then it hands that weapon to the person holding the knife. The next morning I drove myself to the bank, alone, and my hands were steady on that steering wheel for the first time in a long, long while. I stood at the counter and I asked to withdraw $300 from my own account, out of my own money that I had earned with my own two hands, one child's lunch at a time. And the young teller typed something into her machine and she frowned at it, and she typed again, and then she looked back up at me with a kind of pity in her young face that I will carry with me down to my grave. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she said. "I can't process that withdrawal for you. This account is under a power of attorney. Any withdrawals have to be authorized by the agent on file." "The what?" My voice came out of me small as a girl's. "The agent. On file." She turned her screen a few degrees toward me, kind child breaking her own bank's rules to do it, and I hope the Lord blesses her for it. And there on that glowing screen was the name of the person who now held the legal authority over every last dollar I had ever earned in my life. It was not my son, just an insurance renewal, Miss Odessa. Right here on the line, that's all. The form. That form. The one I had signed with her warm hand wrapped so gently around my own, guiding the pen down onto the paper while her laughing cousin pressed a notary seal into it, and the two of them smiled at me like I had done something wonderful. It had never once been insurance. I had signed my whole life over into that woman's hands, and I had thanked her out loud for helping me hold the pen steady while I did it. I do not remember driving home. To this day, I could not tell you one thing about that drive. I only remember standing in my own kitchen afterward, my kitchen in my house on my street that I had bled for and saved for and cried over in a bank parking lot, and it did not feel like mine anymore. It felt like a room in somebody else's plan, a room they were going to sell out from under me. And Simone came in from the front room drying her hands slow on a dish towel, and she took one look at my face, and this time she did not even bother to pretend. "You went to the bank," she said. It was not a question, and her voice had changed. Not cruel. Something so much worse than cruel. Patient. "Miss Odessa, sweetheart, you have got to stop this now. You are getting yourself all worked up over things that you do not understand, and you are going to go and make yourself sick." She took a step toward me across my own kitchen floor. "You keep on acting all confused and paranoid like this in front of people, the bank, the neighbors, that boy of yours, and folks are going to start to wonder whether you can take care of your own self at all anymore. Is that what you want a judge deciding it for you? A home." She tilted her head at me, so gentle, so sorrowful. "I am the only thing on God's earth standing between you and that place, Odessa. I am the only one keeping you safe. Now don't you forget it." And then she smiled at me. And she picked her dish towel back up, and she turned around, and she went right on back to drying my plates one by one, as if nothing at all had happened in that room. That night I sat alone at my own kitchen table long, long after she had gone off to her bed. The house ticked and settled and cooled around me in the dark. And I reached out and picked up my old coffee mug, the one chipped on the rim that I have had so many years I cannot even remember buying it, that fits my hand like it grew there. And I held it in both hands, and I stared at the reflection of my own face in the black window over the kitchen sink. I had lost my son. I had lost my money. I had lost the key to my own front door in every single way that a key can matter. And for the first time in my whole long, hard-won life, sitting there in the dark of my own house, I could not tell you whether I was losing my home or losing my mind. She had made me doubt the one thing I had trusted through every trial and every grief the good Lord had ever seen fit to send me. She had gone and made me doubt my own self. I went to Bernadine Jefferson because I had nowhere left on this earth to go, and no one left to trust, not even any more my own self. I had not sat down beside that woman in church in nearly a year. Simone had seen to every bit of that. But Bernadine Jefferson had pinched the meat of my arm through 40 years of long Sunday sermons, And there are some things that a stranger's warm hands simply cannot erase, no matter how many towels they fold. I drove out to Bernadine's house on a gray Saturday morning, while Simone believed me to be sitting in a doctor's waiting room clear across town. And when Bernadine opened up her front door and saw my face standing there on her step, she did not say hello to me. She said, "Oh, Odessa, oh no, not you too." I did not understand her. I stood there on her cold front step, and I told her everything, all of it, everything I have just now told you. The mail, and the money, and the papers, and the son I had been so carefully taught to be afraid of, and the burner I never in my life left on. And with every word I spoke, Bernadine's old face got older and sadder, and when at last I ran out of words, she just reached out and took hold of my hand and drew me inside and shut the door behind us. She sat me down at her own kitchen table. Then she got up and went to her hall closet, and she came back carrying a shoebox. "I lost my house 2 years ago," Bernadine said, setting it down. "Same as you're fixing to lose yours. Sweetest woman you ever met moved right on in to help me after my hip. Handled all my mail for me. Turned my own daughter against me till I was convinced my own baby girl was after my money. And by the time I finally understood what was happening to me, it was all gone. Every dime. The house, too. I've been living over here with my sister ever since." She lifted the lid off that shoebox. It was full to the top with paper. Photographs, printouts, names written out in her careful hand. "After it happened to me," she said, "I found I could not just go on and sit inside the shame of it. So I started looking. Took me the better part of 2 years. But church ladies talk Odessa. Word does get around, if you know how to listen for it." And she slid a single photograph across the table to me, and the floor of my entire life dropped clean out from under it. It was Simone, my Simone, the woman who cooked my breakfast every morning of the world, the woman who had cried real tears over my Elijah's photograph and set a white carnation beside his face on the 9th of March. Except the name written out on the back of that photograph in Bernadine's own careful hand was not Simone Vaughn. It was Renata DeVoe. "That is not the only name she goes by either," Bernadine said, quiet. "There's a man she brings along with her plays at being the money manager, and a big heavy-set woman plays the notary. Says they're her cousin, her sister, her brother. Story changes every single time. Andre, Della. The woman cooking my breakfast was a professional. I was not her first mother. I was her 9th. 9 women, 9 kitchens, 9 daughters who never once existed. She had not stumbled upon a lonely old widow by any accident. She had hunted one. She had gone out looking for a woman exactly like me, and she had found me. And my son, my quiet, hard, walled-off, greedy son, had been trying to warn me every single day of it. Here is the part I have never once been able to forgive. And I have made my peace with a great many things in this life. She got in through my son. When I fell that autumn on the gravel, Terrence panicked 500 miles away and helpless. And he did just exactly what a good son is supposed to do. He found a care service, a real and proper one, and he arranged and he paid out of his own pocket for somebody to come and look after his mama. He set the whole thing up. He put down the deposit himself. And somewhere inside that network, or close enough to it to be fishing out of the very same pond, a woman named Renata DeVoe sat reading through intake files, looking for one particular kind of fish. A widow, one who owned her own home free and clear, one whose children lived far away, one who had just been badly frightened by a fall. I was perfect for her. I was everything she was looking for. She got herself sent out to my door in the place of the real aide my son had hired, and by the time anybody on God's earth might have noticed the switch she had already made herself, the only living soul I would let near me. My son had reached out his own hand to catch his falling mother, and she had climbed in through the very opening that his love had left behind. Andre Vaughn was the mouth of the drain. That account my money had been bleeding into week after week after week was his. Della was the seal pressed down onto the paper. It was not one wicked woman with a gift for old ladies. It was a business, a small, patient, evil little family business. And I was that quarter's profit. I sat with all of it for one whole day. I let myself feel every bit of it, the shame and the rage and the deep grief for my son and for the whole year the two of us had lost and would never get back again. I let myself feel like an old fool. I sat at my own kitchen table that whole long day, and I looked at everything with new eyes. The white carnation she had set beside Elijah's photograph, I understood now that it had not cost her one thing. It was a con woman's carnation. She had bought it the way a fisherman buys bait, and she had watched me weep over it, and known in that flat, cold nothing underneath her face that she had set the hook deep. Every kindness, every Sam Cooke song hummed over my folded towels, every slow reading of the Psalms in the evening, every last one of them had a price tag turned around backward so I could not see it. She had studied me. She had learned my dead husband's birthday the way a burglar learns which floorboard creaks. And the worst of it, the very worst, was that it had worked. It had all felt exactly like love. And there is a part of an old woman's heart that still even now, even knowing everything, misses the feeling of it. I am not too proud to tell you that. Missing a thing that was never real is its own particular kind of grief, and I sat in it that whole long day. And then when the day was done, I got up and I stopped being one. I want to be very careful how I tell you this next part, because people do so love to say afterward that a lawyer saved me, or the police saved me, or that my son came riding in at the last minute and saved his poor old mother. Nobody saved me. I want that set down plain once and for all. At 67 years old, with my hands shaking and half of my own mind still convinced that I was the crazy one, I saved my own self. Everybody else who walked through my door that day only did the things that I told them to do. I did not run down to the courthouse crying. I made a plan instead. First I went home, and I put my old warm smile right back on. I played the sweet, confused, obedient old woman that Simone had worked so long and so hard to convince me that I was. I let her fuss over me. I let her handle my mail. I let her think it was all going exactly to her schedule. And the whole time on the inside I was cold and clear and still as a winter morning before the sun comes up. Jalen showed me how to record on the little phone I kept down in my apron pocket. Not to trap anybody by trickery, understand a woman is allowed under God and the law both to keep a record of what is said inside her own kitchen. I just let it run while Simone talked. And Simone, who believed in her heart that she had already won, talked a great deal. About my confusion, about the stove I had never once left on in my life, about how she was the only thing on earth standing between me and a locked-up ward. Every word of it went right down onto that little phone, clear as a Sunday bell. Bernadine gave me her whole shoebox to use. 8 other names, 8 other kitchens, 8 other daughters who never existed. And then I made the telephone calls my own self. I called a woman named Tanya Robinson over at Adult Protective Services, and I did not come to that woman as a victim. I came to her as a witness with the evidence already gathered up and sitting in my hand. I called the police, and I called my son. I told every one of them the exact same thing. Do not come yet. You wait for my word. I know precisely how this woman finishes her business, because she has finished it 8 times before, and I am going to let her walk all the way into the middle of the room before I reach over and turn on the light, because I did know what was coming. Renata DeVoe ran to a schedule. First the mail, then the slow, loving isolation, then the power of attorney signed with a guided hand, and then the very last step, the one she had run 8 separate times before ever she came to me. She cashes it all out. She sells the house right out from under the old woman's feet. She and Andre came on a Wednesday afternoon carrying a folder fat with papers and a real estate listing form sitting right there on the top of the stack, all smiles, all warmth, ready and eager to help poor confused old Miss Odessa downsize somewhere safe and easy. I had the coffee already made. I even poured the 2 of them a cup apiece. And then, one single piece at a time slow, I began to set my own folder down on the kitchen table between us. The bank statements first, every dollar drained away week by week into Andre's account, laid out in black and white. Then the trust papers, my son's fortress, with a note in my own shaking hand, paperclip to the front, saying plainly what they truly were. Then Bernadine's photograph turned over so that the name Renata DeVoe stared up off the table. And then, last of all, I set the little phone down right there in the middle of the coffee cups, and I pressed the button, and Simone's own voice came pouring out of it into that quiet kitchen, warm and patient and full of poison. You keep on acting all confused and paranoid like this, and folks are going to start to wonder whether you can take care of your own self at all anymore. The kitchen went so quiet you could hear the coffee cooling, and I watched the warmth drain right out of that woman's face like water running out through a crack in a cup. And what was left underneath it was a thing I had never once seen there in 8 whole months, though it must have been there the entire time, just under the surface watching me. Nothing. Just flat cold, calculating nothing at all. Odessa, she said, and even her voice was a stranger's to me now. You do not know what you are doing here. You are a confused old woman, and if you push this thing, I will stand up in front of a judge, and I will say so. And just who do you imagine that he is going to believe? He's going to believe them, I said, and I nodded toward my own front door. It opened. Tanya Robinson came through at first with her county badge held up. 2 uniformed officers came in right behind her, and behind the both of them, looking at Simone with a face carved out of solid stone, came a detective by the name of Harold Greer. Simone stood up out of her chair so fast that she knocked her whole cup of coffee clear across my kitchen table. Andre was already up and reaching for the back door. It did him no earthly good at all. You want to know how they finally caught up with the woman who had emptied out 9 kitchens across 3 states? An old church lady let her pour the coffee first. I told you my son would come. He came. He walked into my kitchen while the officers were still standing there reading Andre his rights off of a little card. And my boy, my quiet, walled-off 44-year-old boy, was carrying a shoebox of his very own. He set it down on the table right next to Bernadine's, and he opened up the lid, and he could not bring himself to look at me while he did it. Bank receipts. Months and months of them. Deposit after deposit after deposit, every one in an amount that I recognized on sight, because I had sat in Gloria's kitchen and watched those very same amounts get sucked back out of my account just days after they went in. For 4 whole months, locked out of my house, turned away at my own front door by a stranger told over and over that his mother did not want to see him. My son had been quietly putting his own money into the account she was draining dry, trying blind to keep his mother afloat against a leak he could not find the source of. And underneath all the receipts were 3 complaint forms. Adult Protective Services, filed by Terrence Whitfield, one dated in November, one in December, one in the cold heart of January. And every single one of them was stamped closed. Client declines contact. Client states she does not wish to see her son. She had answered my door and my telephone, and she had spoken to the whole wide world with my own mouth telling every one of them that Odessa Whitfield did not want her own boy. That cold, hard, unreadable look my son had given me at the door back in October, the one I had been so sure was greed a buzzard's patient stare, I finally understood it. Standing in my kitchen, I finally understood it. It was not a man scheming to take his mother's house. It was a son standing on the shore, watching a stranger drag his drowning mother out to sea, screaming a warning across the water that she would not hear. After they had taken Simone and Andre away in the backs of 2 separate cars down my own quiet street, the house went still again. But it was a different kind of still. It was my still. My own quiet come back home to me at last. Terrence stood in the middle of my kitchen and did not seem to know what on earth to do with his own 2 hands. 44 years old, and he looked 12 again. He looked exactly the way he had looked the day we lowered his daddy into the ground, and he would not take my hand. So I went to him, and I did the thing I should have done a whole year before and never did. I took my son's face in both of my hands. These hands, the hands that fed a whole school full of other people's children, the hands that shook so badly a con woman had to steady them to sign my life away, and I made him look at me. "I am sorry, baby," I said to him. I let a stranger walk right in between us. I believed her over my own blood. Over you. And you had never once done a thing in your life but love me clumsy, and I am so sorry. I am so sorry, son. And my boy folded straight down onto his knees right there on my sloped old kitchen floor, and he put his head down in my lap the way he had not done since he was a small child, and he cried. And I cried. And he said the words that I will carry with me all the rest of my days on this earth, and straight on into the next. "I don't need the house, Mama." His voice was wrecked clean through. "I never wanted the house. I never wanted anything but you. I just needed you to pick up the phone." I held my son's head in my 2 hands, and outside the kitchen window the foolish sunflowers I had planted for no reason at all, except that they were beautiful, the ones nobody could tell me were a waste anymore. They were nodding their heavy heads in the afternoon wind. And I thought to myself this right here, this is the thing she very nearly took from me. Not the house. Not the money. This. Now I made you a promise way back at the start that I would tell you the truth. And the truth is not tidy. The truth almost never is. We did not get all of the money back. A good deal of it was simply gone spent, moved off somewhere. The law could not follow it the same way it had gone for Bernadine and for the 7 women who came before her. Renata DeVoe was charged, and Andre right alongside her, but the courts grind slow and they grind fine, and there were long nights in the months that followed where I lay awake and wondered whether any single bit of it would truly stick, and I did not get my year back. My son and I lost 12 whole months that the 2 of us will never ever have again in this life. And there is a grief buried down inside of that which no judge's verdict will ever dig out. But I kept my house, I kept my mind, and I got my boy back home. At 67 years old, I have finally learned that sometimes that is exactly what winning looks like. It does not look clean, it does not look whole, but it is yours and you carry it home, and you are grateful all the same. It has been 8 months now since the day the coffee spilled across my kitchen table. The tomatoes came back up this spring taller than ever they were, and I put in a whole second row of sunflowers along the west fence, because if one row of them was foolish, then 2 rows was downright rebellious, and I have decided that at my age I have earned myself a little rebellion. The power of attorney is torn all to pieces. The trust my son built for me, the fortress I once mistook for a cage, and thanked a stranger for warning me about, is back the way that he always meant it to be, with me holding every last key to it in my own hand. Terrence and Ayanna bring the grandbabies down most every Sunday now, and we all crowd in around that same old kitchen table, and it is loud. Lord, it is so loud, and I thank God on my knees for every bit of the noise. I owe Ayanna an apology that I am still paying off slow in cornbread and sweet potato pie. Because come to find out, my daughter-in-law, the nurse, was the very first one of us to smell something gone wrong. That day back in October when she took my arm and turned it over in her hands, and I snatched it back from her, offended clear through, she was not accusing me of a thing. She was checking an old woman's arm for the marks of somebody who was not being cared for right. She saw it coming before any one of the rest of us did. And I was so busy being insulted at being touched that I never once noticed I was being loved. I gave my grandson Jalen his grandfather's watch, Elijah's watch that I had kept in a drawer for 20 years. That boy saved his grandmother's whole life with a cell phone and a cool head and a reset password, and his granddaddy would have busted every last button clean off his good Sunday shirt with the pride of it. And Bernadine Jefferson and I, well, the 2 of us started something. Second Saturday of every single month now in the fellowship hall down at Mount Zion, we hold ourselves a little meeting. Just us older women mostly, though. Anybody at all is welcome to come and sit. There's coffee, and there's pound cake, and there's a whole lot of listening. And we talk plain out loud with no shame allowed in the room about the sweet voices that come knocking at the door, about who it is that's been handling your mail here lately, about that insurance form you don't quite recall signing, about how lonely is the crack that they slip in through, and how there is not one bit of sin in a body being lonely, but there is a whole wide world of danger in it. And that danger belongs to them, to answer for before God, and never ever to you. And the women come. First just 1, then 2, then a whole room full of them. Some come with questions. Some come carrying nothing but their shame. And some more than you would ever want to believe. Some come in carrying a shoebox of their own. There was one back in the spring. A tiny little thing named Miss Eula, 81 years old, hands folded so tight in her lap the knuckles had gone pale. She did not say a word for the first 2 meetings, just sat in the back and drank her coffee and listened. And on the 3rd Saturday, when the room had gone quiet, she raised up one of those trembling hands, and in a voice you had to lean in to hear, she said, "There's a young man been driving me to my appointments. He's got me a new phone. Says the old one wasn't safe, and I can't seem to reach my nephew on it anymore." And the whole room went still because every last one of us knew that story. Down in our bones we had lived that story. And Bernadine went and sat down beside her and took her hand, and by the end of that afternoon we had Miss Eula's nephew on the telephone and a plan on paper. She still comes. She brings a lemon cake now that would make you weep. And she is still in her own house, and that is not a small thing. That is the whole thing, because that is the part nobody tells you about being robbed like I was robbed. The shame of it wants you to stay quiet. The shame says you should have known an old fool like you let her right in the door. But shame kept in the dark just grows. And shame set out on a table in a church fellowship hall next to a pound cake in front of 10 other women nodding their heads, because it happened to them too that shame starts to turn into something else. It starts to turn into a warning. It starts to turn into a wall around the next woman's house. I tell every last one of them the very same thing that I finally at 67 learned for my own self. You are not crazy, you are not stupid, and you are not alone. I do not spend a great deal of my time on forgiveness. People expect me to being a churchwoman and all. But I have come to believe that forgiveness is a matter to be settled between Renata DeVoe and her God whenever that day comes for her. And in the meantime, I have got tomatoes that need tending and grandbabies coming Sunday, and a room full of women who need to hear that they are not crazy. What I spend my time on now is staying awake and keeping every woman I can reach awake right along with me, because they came for a lonely old woman. They just forgot one thing. Lonely does not mean helpless, and it has never, not once in all my long life, meant stupid.